All right, so let me just briefly introduce Stephen, because he'll do a much better job of talking about what he knows and doesn't know. But as he will probably say, he's not from the film world. It's not what he knows and does. But because a large part of what I promised you in this class was about how to navigate when you leave here. There's a bridge class between, I think I said, between here and the outside world. A lot of what you're going to need to know when you get out there is to how you present yourself, how you put yourself in touch with people who make sense, how you identify those people, and how you want to meet them. So Stephen's really an expert at that. I've known Stephen for now a bunch of years officially.
Yeah.
That means you're almost as old as me now.
Hopefully I don't catch up.
That's right. That would be weird. That's right. But I do think that I asked Stephen to come here every year because I think what he has to talk about today, combined with what we're going to be doing in about 6 weeks when we talk about career planning and career building, is something that's just not offered anywhere else in the school, and I think that there's a lot to be gleaned. So, Stephen, why don't you come on up?
Thank you. Not that I was expecting applause, but I thought somebody might be clap. By the time I'm done, you guys might not clap at all. So, yeah, I appreciate this. I always love coming and speaking with Nora's class. And as he said, it's always interesting because I do yours and Seth. You know, there's a couple. I end up doing these entertainment ones, and I'm
no seat sets class.
He's in the theater now. He kind of upgraded. He's on the first floor theater down in the building. It's pretty cool. So. But what I'm going to go through is a lot of techniques, and I start out with this slide. In my belief, there's 3 types of speeches or presentations or people that'll come talk to you. Right? One's aspirational, right? And I put it in terms of cooking. Aspirational is, you know, I want to be a chef. I want to learn how to cook. It's all these great things. Inspirational is if I learn how to cook, I can eat healthy and maybe less expensive. I can do things with my family. Educational is I don't know how to cook, so I better learn how to do it. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So I'm not aspirational or inspirational. I'm going to be educational. There's some stuff that I'm going to do with you guys. It's almost like a recipe. It's word for word. But also these techniques, there's about 10 of them, and I'll go through them pretty quick. They all kind of build on each other. All right, and as Norm said, I'm not in entertainment. I'm actually a lifelong entrepreneur because I'm technically unhireable. I've never had a job, and I didn't understand why. When I was going through college, you know, like most of us do, I was going out and doing resumes and doing all these psychological assessments, and nobody would hire me. And it wasn't until many years later when I moved into sales training that I understood where my skill set is, and I don't fit in a traditional box. I tend to break things apart and then figure out how to put them back together and simplify things down. So I'm going to walk through this. Some of the slides are very text heavy. Any of you guys that want the presentation afterwards, I'll get it to you. So if you're trying to take notes, that's great. Some of the slides are just going to kind of be fun and things like that. But let's start out with this. My topic was tornado technique and why isolation is a good thing. And some of this is going to be psychological. All right, so when I say the term isolation, what does that mean to you guys? Like what comes to mind? By yourself, desperate, right? I'll warn you guys in advance too. There's no trick questions. So there's no wrong answers except one place there is a trick question, and I will warn you it's a trick question. And you'll probably still get it wrong even though I warned you. But isolation, a lot of times when you say it's about being alone and dark and desolate, right? And you guys are in film and entertainment. This to me is fascinating. You can reprogram your brain in a matter of seconds if you know how to do it. Right? So whenever I say isolation is a good thing, people are like, oh, being alone, and what do you mean, and it's all bad. I go, why does it have to be bad? Right? That's the picture that we tell ourselves. If I said, isolation is a good thing. Right? If you guys just picture this when I say the word isolation, your entire frame of reference changes, your physiology changes, what you think about. Right? So the reason this is important is there's a lot of negative words, there's a lot of negative associations that we get, and we can learn how to retrain our brain just by the visuals we tell each other. Right, and what we say to ourselves. This is what makes storytelling and filmmaking great. You can create things in your mind that your brain believes. So I have a different definition of isolation. To me, isolation is about being specific, targeted, and focused and getting exactly what you want. Does that make sense? Isolation to me is good. If I know exactly what I want, exactly who I want to meet, exactly the companies I want to work with, now becomes a sequence of how do we get to that point. Couple little fun slides before we get into it. The only thing you can control in your life, there's only two things you can control. Attitude and your actions. That's it. You can't control what happens at school sometimes. You can't control what happens with the weather. You can't control what happens with the environment. Your actions and your attitude are it. So when something bad happens, what's your attitude and what are your actions towards that? That's all you can control. And when you learn that, you go, oh, I've got the control over my own frame of reference. Let me do a better job in how I react to things around me. Can you stay focused? This one's pretty cool. It's not an animation. Can everybody see it kind of spinning? Mm-hmm. Right, if you haven't seen it before, it's a fun little trick. I want you to pick a black dot, stare at it, and tell me what happens when you stare at it. Should work. Stare at the black dot. What happens?
Nothing.
It stops moving. Thank you. Exactly. All this is designed to do is show you the world's always spinning around us. Right? You notice I didn't tell you which dot to pick. You all have to figure out where to focus, but when you can laser focus on something, all the rest of the world stops spinning. Right? Again, all I'm trying to do is just reprint some things in your mind about focus and how you can handle things. This still works for those of you that have seen Alice in Wonderland. It's getting a little dated. I may have to come up with a new analogy because it's age sensitive when you start talking to a younger group. But there's a scene in Alice in Wonderland where she's trying to figure out where to go, and the cat says, "Where do you want to go?" And she says, "It doesn't matter." Right? Well, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. So again, this point of where do we want to go, what are we trying to accomplish? One fun one, this one goes over really well in the South. It doesn't go over so well in LA. Some of my stuff's not politically correct. It says you've got to know your vision if you want to be a leader. If not, you might kill your follower. I know. In the South it goes great. This is just designed to show that, hey, if people are following you, you know, you've got to protect them. You've got to know where you're going, and if not, it's a really dangerous path. Let's talk about values for a minute. Does anybody know what values means? All right, that wasn't a trick question. I didn't know. I still don't really fully understand. People are like, well, what are your values? I'm like, here's what I learned about values. It took me a while. You guys can play along with this if you know the answers. We're going to fill in the blanks, all right? Birds of a feather flock together. But opposites, let's try another one. Your word is your bond, but don't believe everything you
Hear.
You have to see it to
Believe it.
but looks can be
Deceiving.
Absence makes the heart grow
Fonder.
but out of sight, out of mind. Like no matter what there is, so I researched a little more and I found this great quote. Everybody is a genius. If you judge a fish by its ability to believe it can climb a tree, its whole life it believes is stupid. So this guy thinks everybody's a genius. Anybody want to guess who said that?
Einstein.
Einstein, great guess. So Einstein said, hey, everybody's a genius. I went, well, there's got to be an inverse to it. Let's find the inverse quote. Two things are infinite. The universe and human stupidity, and I'm not sure about the universe. Only thing that guy's sure that is infinite is human stupidity. And if you guys know how IQ tests work, right? Who said this? Also Einstein. So he thinks everybody's a genius, he thinks everybody's stupid. The point is, guys, no matter what you believe, no matter what your values are, somebody's going to have the exact opposite belief. You can't convince everybody. Politics is going on right now, and it's fascinating because you've got two camps entrenched in belief no matter what's going on. Right? Trump says he could shoot somebody and Hillary might go to jail, but who cares? We've got our beliefs. There's always going to be opposite sides of the equation. That's what you got to realize. So as you do this, you go, all right, well, what's my vision? What's my value? What do I really want to accomplish in life? And this is where we're going to start moving into some of the recipes and sequences. Is if you ask yourself, what are your goals? Have you ever thought about, where do you want to be in 10 years? And I'm not let's set 10-year goals kind of person. But there's some specific things I learned that really tend to help. And we're going to go through it. So when I say, what's your vision? What's it take you to move ahead? Where do you want to be, 10 years from now after school? We're going to try and outline some things that I think will help. And I call number 1, design your destiny. Right? I used to call it begin with the end in mind. That was really a Covey principle, and design your destiny sounds kind of foo-foo-y for LA, so I like it. It does. It's like LA's like all soft and frilly. Right? But here's the thing. Again, a lot of this stuff talks about company, but hopefully you guys can overlay it into whatever you're doing. Especially if you want to start a company or you want to, have a career. The idea is, for this one, it says, all right, if I were to look 10 years out, what kind of company do I want to have? I'm not talking about job. It's what kind of lifestyle do I want? Right? What kind of people do I want to hang around with? Do I want to hang around with successful people? Do I want to hang around with entertainers? Do I want to hang around with homeless and indigenous? It's, some people like all different groups. Do you like creatives? Do you like traveling? Well, what kind of travel? Do you want a job where you're at home or where you're traveling? And if you are traveling, are you traveling to exotic places? Are you going to Des Moines, Iowa? Right? I have people all the time that say, oh, I love traveling. I say, no, you love vacationing. Right? I travel, but fortunately for me, I get to travel to really cool places. I don't generally go to Lincoln, Nebraska and Des Moines, Iowa. But the idea here is how can you be specific about what kind of things you want from a lifestyle? It has nothing to do with a job. This says, what's the criteria I want? What kind of people do I want to be around? What kind of company do I want? What do I want my lifestyle to be like? And if you end up with 10 or 12 or 13 things, and it's not an easy exercise to go through, but if you get good at it, you then have a framework to measure opportunities against. Right? As you're coming out of school, you might have 2 or 3 jobs or 2 or 3 ideas for companies you want to start. And that's where we use this, is I've got about 12 things on my list, and every idea for a company that we want to start has to hit at least 9 of the 12 things that I want my life to be like, or I don't even try. Does that make a little bit of sense? Right? Because what I do technically now, I run an incubator where I create companies. And we've got hundreds of ideas, but people are like, oh, why don't you do this? Well, if it works, it gives me 3 of 12 things I want, discard it. Not that they aren't cool ideas, it's just you have to have an emotional reason to do things, and this is trying to tie you to that. From a success standpoint, the left is what most, is this the left for you guys? Yeah. Left is what most people think success looks like. The right's what it really is. It's long, it's arduous, it's messy. I think entertainment's always been fascinating. It's a good example of that. The definition of success in entertainment's a 10-year overnight success. Right? And when you look at what a lot of these guys have gone through, by the time you see them, you have no idea what it's taken to get there. Because people see you at the top and think, oh, well, that was easy, I could do it. This is what success really looks like. All right, so, does that make a little sense? Again, I'm flying through. This is about 3 hours worth of content. I'm going to try and get you guys in 40 minutes, so it's going to come fast. But here's a way, again, this is a reframe of your mind. Does anybody know what WIFM stands for? Again, I don't need to pick on LA, but LA's big on WIFM. Anybody know what WIFM stands for? What's in it for me? Right? LA's great. When I moved out here, people were like, oh, why do you like LA? It's like, everybody has an agenda. Right? I don't mind that if you know that people it's very what's in it for me kind of community out here, which is fine. The objective, though, is how do we reframe our minds? So WIFM means what's in it for you, what's in it for me. How can I retrain my mind when I meet somebody to say, hey, what's in it for the other person? How can I help that other person? How can I add value for them? Right? And it comes down to a couple techniques we're going to talk about. But there's some interesting things you can do. Is it on the next one? Yeah, here we go. It'll be there next. So rather than thinking about when you meet somebody, what does this person do? It's like, how can I help that other person? And there's some ways you can do it adding value, something as simple as email. And I'm going to give you guys an example of an email. And at some point I'm going to do this because it's been long enough now. And you guys may know this guy. I used to not use his name, but I almost always try and start an email out with the word you. Right? How many of you guys get email and it starts with I? Like somebody sitting and said, hey, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And most people start out first person. I start out, third saying, you and I haven't met. You and I have, I'm going to start picking on people. What's your name?
Nate.
Nate. If I send an email to Nate saying, hey, Nate, I'm Steve at Meade and I did this and I did this, it doesn't have the same visceral reaction if I said, you and I haven't met, but. Right? And I'll give you an example of how this worked. We wanted to get a meeting with a guy years ago, and I'll tell his name now. I used to not tell his name, but his name was Steve McPherson. He was president of ABC. created Dancing with the Stars, Desperate Housewives. I mean, Steve was a big deal and ran into a little trouble at ABC and left. And we wanted him to come work in one of our companies. And I gave the task to a guy I work with who wrote the email. And the email said, "Dear Steve, my name's blah, blah, blah," and I won't tell you his name, Norm knows him. And he went on to proceed saying, "I've won 3 Emmys. I'm nominated for a 4th. I launched the Dr. Phil show. I did this, I won that, I did this." 3 paragraphs of all the things this guy did to try and get credibility to impress somebody he's never met. All just to get a meeting. I looked at the email, I said, "This is never going to work." I rewrote it, it was 3 sentences. And what was relevant was we had read an article. When Steve left Disney, he said, "Hey, this is an embarrassing situation. I really want to change it. And boy, what's most important to me in my life right now is leaving a legacy for my 2 daughters. And I'd love to be able to find some to leave a legacy." That's the article I read. So my email said, "Dear Stephen, you and I haven't met, but I read an article about you recently. You stated that you wanted to leave a legacy for your daughters. I believe I might be able to help you accomplish that goal. Can we meet for coffee?" 3 sentences. Didn't say what we did, no. Read an article. You want to leave a legacy, I might be able to help you accomplish your goal. You guys just feel the difference in that? Now, I still wanted to meet with him. It was still completely what's in it for me. My goal was to get in front of him, to get him involved, but the email was completely about him. So when you learn how to rephrase even ways you're talking to other people, making it about the other person, it's a huge deal. And I don't think I have it in here. Basically, these are all examples. I did the last one, and again, some of this stuff I want to put in, but for time I can't. Can I give you guys one more example? Does this make sense? It may help. Kid came up to me.
You got 2 hours. Just
Oh, all right. Normally I'm 45 minutes in Q&A. If we got a little more time, I'll try not to bore you guys. A kid came up to me at a class, and because I love talking to college, because if you guys get this early, man, it'll really help. But came up to me afterwards and said, "Will you please read my cover letter? I'm interviewing for a job." It was in financial services. And I looked at him, I said, "Look, I'm kind of like Simon Cowell. You do not want me to read your cover letter." "No, I really do. Please read it." I'm like, "Trust me, you don't." "Please." I said, "Okay. If I read this, you have to promise me you're not going to take it personally. I'm going to try and help you." Okay. Hands me his cover letter, and his cover letter proceeded to say, "Dear so-and-so, I have an interview. I'd love to come work because I would learn how to read spreadsheets, and I would learn this in the market, and I would learn this, and I would be great at that." It was 3 paragraphs of all the things he was going to get out of the job. And I looked at it and said, "I'd never freaking hire you." "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "If I'm that guy, I'm sitting there, I probably have 2 kids going to college. I've got a bonus riding on whether or not you